Mr. Day of Stoneham.
Madam Speaker, thank you, and through you to the members. Madam Speaker, I rise to introduce and ask for support of the Conference Committee report on H. 4885, enact modernizing firearm laws. And as I do, I ask that when a vote be taken, it's taken by a call of the yeas and nays.
Mr. Day moves that a vote be taken by a call of the yeas and nays. Those joining with them will rise. Division 1. 38, sufficient number having arisen when a vote be taken by a call of the yeas and nays. Mr. Day of Stoneham.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to introduce this Conference Committee report, which is reflective of years of deliberative discussions and compromise. The end product of these discussions is a bill that's designed to make us all safer, to make the residents of Massachusetts safer, our students safer, gun owners safer, our law enforcement professionals safer. Madam Speaker, gun violence is anathema to a civil society, but it continues to uniquely plague us here in America. I've heard some critics of this legislation say that it's unnecessary, that it's a solution in search of a problem. Well, here is a problem. Since June 1 alone, June 1, here in Massachusetts, there have been 14 deaths from gun violence. Paresha Shir Yashub, 27, from Taunton, shot and killed. David Rivera, 31, from Springfield, killed in a double shooting that resulted from the escalation of a fist fight. Mark Cavallaro, Thelma Tatton, both 56, from Bedford, shot and killed by their daughter, who had been seeking mental health treatment. Ryan Babcock, 38 years old, found shot to death in his car in Pittsfield at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. A 17-year-old, shot multiple times and killed in Lynn. Aliana Dickey, a 15-year-old who had just graduated from middle school in Lynn, gunned down in her home. Her father not allowed to enter the crime scene when he arrived to hear the news. Christian Cousins, 17, from Stoughton, who would have been entering his senior year at Stoughton High School in September. Warren Julian, 40, from Jamaica Plain, one of 4 shootings that occurred on the 4th of July in Boston alone. Shane Goodson, 18 years old, from Springfield. Dexter Ortiz, 38 years old, from Holyoke. Albert Valentin Arias Muscat, 17 years old, from Lawrence. Henry Marte, 27 years old, also from Lawrence, shot in the head and killed. Andy Baez, 35 years old, from Boston, gunned down on the Arbor Way on Sunday night. And DeMonte William, 19 years old, just 3 days ago, killed in Springfield by a gun. That's just in Massachusetts. Since June 1, there have been 107 mass shootings, injuring 576 people and killing 103 people in the United States. June 1 to today. So there's your problem that we need to solve. We don't have to live this way. And we as representatives, having sworn to protect the Commonwealth, the common health, the common good of our residents, are obliged to do what we can to stop the scourge of gun violence. Madam Speaker, 2 years ago this past June, a rogue Supreme Court issued a decision upending decades of jurisprudence by cherry-picking through centuries of history in an attempt to limit the ability of states to pass basic firearm safety measures. The Bruin decision, as it's known, plunged courts across the country into deep confusion as they tried to muddle their way through its tortured originalism and to apply it to real-life and often tragic cases brought before them. Judges in different jurisdictions now cite to the same passages of history in rendering completely opposite decisions. While the severity of the Bruin decision may have been shocking, we in this House were prepared, engrossing legislation within days that aligned our law with what was proscribed by the court, while simultaneously preserving the safety of our neighborhoods and the rights of our people. Our speed in responding to that decision was yet another sign of how fiercely this House has guarded our firearm safety structure as we have led our state and our nation in enacting laws that keep our residents safe. As I said when we debated and passed an earlier version of this legislation, modernizing our firearm laws here in Massachusetts is an exercise in which we, and particularly we in this House, engage in regularly. We embrace that well-established practice again here today. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the last legislative term, the Speaker made a commitment to us as representatives and to the Commonwealth at large to engage in a full review of our firearm laws and to make them better for all. Today, Mr. Speaker, you deliver on that commitment. You and your staff's dedication and resolve have been the steel backbone of the efforts that bring us here today. For that, I say thank you. I also thank each and every member of the House for your engagement, your conversations, your concerns, and your criticisms. We began our review of the firearm laws by getting out of the State House and traveling the Commonwealth, directly hearing from all of you in your districts, listening to your constituents, accepting input and thoughts from advocates at each stop on the tour. It was bipartisan and it was bicameral, and I thank you all for your engagement. We started on Cape Cod in February 2023. I thank the gentleman from Barnstable, the gentleman from Falmouth, the gentleman from Dennis, the gentlelady from Kingston, the gentleman from Plymouth, the gentlelady from Provincetown, the gentleman from Barnstable, the gentleman from Falmouth, who all joined community leaders in a discussion about the challenges we face at the intersection between firearms, mental health, and suicide. From that listening session came important parts of today's bill before us, allowing the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Public Health to share information with the Department of Criminal Justice Information Services so that our local licensing authorities will know about the mental health challenges applicants may be facing. We further empowered those local licensing authorities to have access to histories of the involuntary commitments of applicants. We also improve our extreme risk protective order law, our red flag law, by allowing our medical professionals, those who actually treat and observe individuals who are in distress and who acutely pose a substantial risk of harm to themselves or others, to petition a court to remove firearms temporarily from those individuals while they're in crisis. We will also now allow law enforcement officers who have interacted with an individual in the past 30 days to raise that flag of concern to avoid a potential tragedy like we saw up in Lewiston, Maine. In March 2023, we traveled to Worcester. I thank the gentleman from West Boylston, the three gentlemen from Worcester, the gentlelady from Leominster, the gentleman from Fitchburg, the gentleman from Attleboro, and the senator from the 1st Worcester for joining us there as we discussed the concerns about firearms and domestic violence. From that listening session came provisions in this bill that update our harassment prevention order laws under Chapter 258E to be consistent with other abuse prevention orders by allowing courts to order the suspension and dispossession of firearm licenses, permits, and firearms themselves contemporaneously with the issuance of the HPO. We also now empower our law enforcement professionals to collect a respondent's firearm within 24 hours if that respondent does not surrender that firearm pursuant to a court order. Later in May, we traveled to Greenfield, where we were joined from the gentlelady from Deerfield, the gentlelady from Athol, the gentleman from East Hampton, the gentleman from Belchertown, and the gentlelady from Amherst, where we listened to concerns from hunters and recreational firearm owners about the existing laws. From that listening session came sections in this bill that will now consolidate and reorganize our firearms licensing sections into a single unified process with consistent and transparent standards and procedures for all applicants. And we correct the loophole in our laws to now allow individuals to safely transport their firearms on ATVs. We moved on to Brockton. I thank the gentleman from Brockton, the chair of the Veterans and Federal Affairs Committee, for hosting us, and the two gentleladies from Brockton, the gentleman from Sharon, the gentlelady from Abington, the gentleman from Quincy, for joining us as we heard about the impact of gun violence on that region of Massachusetts. From this discussion emerged the need for us to address concerns about funding our violence prevention programs that work. And this bill meets that moment by standing up a task force that will review the availability of federal funding and make recommendations on how best to support community violence prevention programs. This, to quote the Speaker, will be a game changer in our effort to support groups that are doing the work necessary to prevent gun violence from erupting on our streets. We moved on to Lowell. I thank the gentleman from Lowell, the gentlelady from Lowell, the gentlelady from Melrose, the gentleman from Beverly, and the gentlelady from Pepperell for their hospitality and engagement as we spoke and heard about the challenges presented by ghost guns and modifications to otherwise legal firearms. With this bill, Massachusetts will now lead the nation once again in our approach to addressing ghost guns, those homemade, untraceable firearms that continuously find their ways into the hands of gangs and violent individuals who want to make our neighborhood streets modern hellscapes. We will now define a frame and a receiver as a firearm and require them to be serialized through a clear process with the state and to be registered just like all other firearms. If you want to create a firearm on your own, you're no longer going to be allowed to pump these weapons onto our streets with impunity. And if you try to continue that practice, you're going to face significant criminal penalties. The illegal industry of making and selling ghost guns without any record of what is transpiring is going to end in Massachusetts. Madam Speaker, from Lowell, we traveled to Roxbury, where we were joined by the gentleman from Roxbury, the gentleman from Hyde Park, and the gentleperson from Jamaica Plain, as we listened to the work being done by anti-violence organizations and individuals working to end street violence. We heard about the urgent need to re-examine our current programming and practices, and we responded to that call in this bill by establishing a special legislative commission that will involve key stakeholders in this area, who are charged with examining the existing government funding structure for violence prevention services and considering what communities are currently served and what communities are currently underserved by our funding programs, then making recommendations to us about how to best improve this area to provide our communities with the programming that they truly need. Our next step brought us to a packed house in Framingham, where we heard concerns from school shootings and the challenges facing our youth. I thank the gentlelady from Marlborough, the gentleman from Framingham, the gentlelady from Framingham, the gentleman from Holliston, the gentlelady from Westboro, the gentleman from Natick, the gentleman from Milford, the gentleman from Watertown, the gentleman from Franklin, and the gentlelady from Newton for their contributions at this stop. As a result of that incredibly impactful listening session, we now authorize our school administrators, those who see our students on a daily basis, to petition a court for an extreme risk protective order if needed. And we clarify that nobody may bring a firearm onto the grounds of a school or onto a school bus that is serving students. We also say that nobody may bring a firearm into a polling place. There will be no intimidation through firearm while our citizens are following their rights to vote. We heard in Framingham from a young woman who described the hurdles she faced in seeking authorization to own self-defense spray for her own protection as she walks to and from school. And so in this bill, we now allow 12 to 15-year-olds to apply for a self-defense permit with parental permission, and 15 to 18-year-olds to independently apply for a self-defense spray permit. We heard some concerns from people about this move, that this would encourage thugs to prey on unsuspecting passersby walking in isolated areas at night by macing them and attempting to mug them. To them, I say that the changes we make in this area of the law do not disturb the status quo for adults and simply extend protections that some parents want for their children. We then moved on to New Bedford, the Fall River area. We were hosted by the gentleman from New Bedford, who contributed so much to this bill, and the gentlelady from Fall River, to hear more concerns from communities directly impacted by gun violence. The concerns we heard there were consistent with the other voices we heard. So we now establish a Violence Prevention Federal Reinvestment Trust Fund to collect federal funds that match a percentage of the funding we are already spending on our SSYI programming. As we collect those funds from the federal government and fill that trust fund, we will be able to appropriate more funding to new and to proven violence prevention programs. We closed May by heading up to Lawrence. We were joined by the gentleman and the leader from Lawrence, the gentlelady from Lawrence, the two gentlemen from Methuen, the gentlelady from South Hamilton, the gentlelady from Andover, the gentlelady from Newburyport, the gentleman from Haverhill, and the senator from the 1st Essex, in a conversation about training and the safe handling of firearms. We agreed with what we heard from representatives of the Gun Owners Action League, that live firearm training is the best practice for gun owners and for overall safety. We heard Goal and the NRA when they said that they strongly encouraged live firearm training, but they did not believe the government could or should require it. While we heard them, we disagree that we cannot take steps here in Massachusetts to ensure that everyone can be made safer around firearms. So we now revamp our training requirements for those applying for a license to carry. In the future, the state police will create a uniform training curriculum and standardized tests for all new applicants. That will include live firearm training and disengagement training. Dealer applicants will also complete an online training program covering their responsibilities. We will also clarify the law to ensure that our local licensing authorities, our law enforcement professionals, receive the training they need to fully understand their licensing, dealer inspection, and reporting responsibilities. We keep the inspection of dealers with our local licensing authorities who know them best. However, if a local licensing authority does not want to continue that practice or is stretched too thin to perform this responsibility, we will now allow them to turn that duty over to our state police. And a year ago in June, Madam Speaker, we concluded our tour with two more stops. First, we joined the gentleman from Springfield, my fellow conference committee member, along with the other three gentlemen from Springfield, the gentleman from Longmeadow, the gentlelady from Holyoke, and the gentlelady from Northampton, to hear about gun violence plaguing the greater Springfield area. In addition to reinforcing the need to examine and revamp what we are doing in violence prevention, programming, and funding, Springfield also brought home to us the need to modernize our approach to assault-style firearms, which have been regulated in Massachusetts since our inception and have been affirmatively prohibited in Massachusetts for decades. We do this by updating the definition of assault-style firearm to include modern firearms and characteristics not contemplated by the existing ban, to codify the Attorney General's 2016 opinion on lookalikes and duplicates, and to require EOPS, with the advice of the Firearm Control Advisory Board, to periodically and regularly update and publish a complete roster of banned assault-style firearms. We protect the ownership, possession, transfer, and sale of assault-style firearms currently legally owned and registered in the Commonwealth with a legacy clause. So to put it simply, if you legally own a properly serialized and registered firearm in Massachusetts as of the effective date of this act, you can continue to own it, sell it, transfer it, do whatever you wish with it. Finally, on June 6th, we visited Lenox Town Hall to again hear from hunters and recreational firearm owners. I thank the gentleman from Lenox, the gentlelady from Pittsfield, and the gentleman from North Adams for their active participation. In addition to reaffirming the concerns we heard in Greenfield, what emerged from this meeting was the need to provide a clear standard for hunting and carrying a firearm while under the influence that is consistent with the standard for operating a motor vehicle under the influence, and to align those penalties as well. We do that in this bill. We will now also require notice to license and permit holders, alerting them 90 days ahead of time that their license or permit is due to expire and that they should renew. We also met with state, local, and federal law enforcement professionals who are focused almost exclusively on investigating and stopping the trafficking of illegal firearms. Thank you to the gentlelady from Dorchester and the gentlelady from Somerville, the Vice Chair of the Judiciary Committee, for their participation at the Fusion Center, where we discussed what law enforcement professionals need to continue to combat the flood of illegal firearms proliferating on our streets from out-of-state sources and from basement-dwelling merchants of death. As a result of that meeting, we will now update our existing firearm reporting system into one state database for firearm registration, reporting, and tracing. We require the registration of firearms not currently appearing on the existing registration transfer portal. We require law enforcement to immediately report crime gun data to the state database, which will automatically populate the federal ATF system for interstate tracing purposes. And we will expand the state's data compilation and reporting requirements with the creation of a publicly accessible online dashboard of anonymized aggregate firearm data to further firearm research and transparency. Madam Speaker, the effort undertaken to bring this bill to the floor today was one that required and involved every member of this chamber, with multiple meetings and sit-downs. Members of the public and myriad advocacy groups from all parts of the political spectrum. I recognize and thank my fellow conferees, specifically my friend and colleague and fellow lead conferee, the senator from Newton, for her unmatched passion in working to make Massachusetts the safest state in the country. Because of her work, we have a better bill here today. I also thank my fellow House conferees, the gentleman from Springfield, without whom we would not have arrived at consensus, and without whom we would not have ensured that all voices were heard in the final product. Sincere thanks also to the gentleman from Webster, who did not support the underlying bill as we headed into conference. He could have sat on that vote and refused to participate, take his ball and bat and go home, as did so many other groups during this process. Instead, he was engaged in conference and offered constructive thoughts and recommendations on how to improve this bill, and his participation did, in fact, improve this bill. Finally, having been tasked with conducting a study of our firearm code, the implications of the courts, and the challenges our communities face, I turned to my staff, who answered this challenge with unparalleled dedication. Thank you to Diana Williams and Michael Musto, who did the indispensable work of keeping the Judiciary Committee running, while other staff undertook the detailed work needed on this legislation. I offer my sincere thanks and gratitude to Talia Quinn, who coordinated the listening tour and served as the point person for public feedback, good, bad, and ugly, and did so with unmatched patience and civility. Thank you also to Attorney Alex O'Connell, who now knows more about our firearm laws than anyone else in the Commonwealth, and who exhibited a mastery of this subject and helped us navigate countless challenges and questions from me, my colleagues, and the public. Finally, to Patrick Prendergast, the staff director who steered this ship with an extraordinarily able hand, thank you for bringing this ship to shore and ensuring that this legislation gets over the finish line while somehow keeping the other 700-plus bills at the top of our minds as well. Mr. Speaker, thank you again for your decades of leadership in making Massachusetts safer for all residents. I urge my colleagues to accept this report and vote in favor of this legislation. Thank you.